I'm going to get a little bit wonkish here. This is going to get a little detailed, but stay with me. And if you stay with me, I think that this will make a ton of sense. This is called the long tail theory. Anybody ever heard of long tail theory? Tom, you have. Long tail theory, if you think about a chart of all the media channels that we have available to us, and if you think about the audience size starting at 0 and going to infinity, and if you think about charting that against the number of media channels, you get the long tail theory. If you think about the broadcast medias, there's only a few of them. The number of media channels is very finite. There's only a handful of media channels that have huge audiences. Okay, this is your broadcast medium. As you go down the scale, you think of things like the Des Moines Register and local papers. There's more newspapers, but their audience size is a little smaller. Okay? Then you start getting out, and this is what we call the long tail. This is where social media lives. The long tail is where social media lives. And if you think about LinkedIn and things like that, it's still kind of broadcasty. It's still kind of like the bigger ones, but it's got social components. Until you get way out here, and this is my Facebook page. There's 500 million people on Facebook. This tail goes forever. And the theory on the long tail theory is doing business over here is different than doing business over here. Fundamentally different, and that's what I want to talk about, is what those differences are. If you treat things over here like you treat things over here, it's not going to work, and that's where organizations struggle. That's where corporations struggle. That's why we're here, because we're trying to figure this out. Does this make sense? Any questions about this, the long tail? It really opened my eyes when I kind of looked at it this way and said, okay, that makes some sense. So let's talk about the differences. The really, really big thing over here is eyeballs. It's views. It's number of viewers. It's how many people read my magazine. It's numbers of people that consume what I broadcast. The really, really big thing over here is interactions. Okay? And if you think about this, it's really hard to interact with CNN. It's really easy to interact with me on my Facebook page. It's built for it. But it's also really, really bad to treat these people like eyeballs. And so there's a continuum here. Somewhere in the middle are companies that are trying to do both. If you think about the comments section on the Des Moines Register page, that's where people are trying to do both, and that's where they're struggling, right? I have a good story about that. I'll share that in a little bit. I'll share it now. Does anybody know the author, I don't know how to pronounce it, Rika Basu? She's about 3 weeks ago, they decided to take the comments section off of her articles because she oftentimes writes about really incendiary kind of hot button topics. And what they did is they're directing people to her Facebook page now. So if you want to comment about her articles, you have to go to Facebook to comment on them. And what that did is it took the anonymity out of the whole thing. So now your neighbor can see what a jerk you are if you're in there flaming on the comments section. And I'll be interested to see how that goes. Julia Thompson is the social media director for the Des Moines Register. She's fairly new. She's been around, about a year? And her and I had a conversation about this 6 or 7 months ago at one of our events, and I was like, we brainstormed, what can we do about these comments section? Because it's just, nobody wants to go in there. And it would be great to be able to talk about the latest, greatest thing in our town in a reasonable manner. And maybe the Facebook thing is the answer. I don't know. I'm very fascinated to watch that, though. So eyeballs versus interactions. This is the one that people, I think, get. It's pretty easy. Money versus time. It takes a lot of money to get a lot of eyeballs in the broadcast, in the head of this chart. This is nothing but money. If I have enough money, I can get my message out to anybody. I just need to be able to manipulate the broadcast medium in a way that my message gets there. This is about time. These things are cheap or free, but it takes time and knowledge to use them. So there's a continuum here. And if you think about it, the stuff in the middle is kind of where those money and time kind of balance. But if you're going to engage in the long tail, in the social media part of this, that time is what you really need to consider, time resources. This is one that's near and dear to my heart. These are transactions and these are relationships. Transactional behavior versus relational behavior. Now, this isn't to say that relationships don't happen over here and that transactions don't happen over here, but the primary goal is fundamentally different. If I go over here and I talk about relationships, people kind of giggle. I'm a recruiter, and I had a boss that came to me one day and said, Ben, you're spending too much time interviewing people. Your interviews are taking too much time. You're wasting time. Because I should take 20 minutes to interview that person. It'd take me 35 or 40 minutes. Because I'm a relationship guy. I'm a talker. And so, and that really, every time I see the slide, I think of that relationship versus transaction. To him, that transaction was what it was about. What can this guy do? Can we sell him? Or this woman? And to me, it was a relationship building thing, because 5 years from now, that person's still working and living in my town, and I want to know who they are and how they're doing. And I want them to know me. So relationships versus transaction is really a fundamental difference between doing business in the tail and doing business in the head. This is the one that probably is going to be one of the more struggling ones for folks that are trainers. The message control here is corporate. Corporate controls the message. Over here, the crowd controls the message. Corporate can be a part of that conversation. Once again, these aren't exclusive, but these are primaries. In the tail, in social media, the crowd controls the message. And this is the hardest part for corporations to do. It's that letting go. It's that you just got to put it out there kind of thing. And that's what people in corporations really struggle with. Because if you come and try to control this message, you'll get your butt handed to you in social media. You will. Anybody know what the term astroturfing is? Astroturfing is kind of fake social media driven by corporate messaging. There was it the Wendy's guy? There's all kinds of stories. If you just do AstroTurf in Google, you'll sit there and read for hours about companies trying to control the message in social media and appear authentic, and it just doesn't work. So this is the hardest part for trainers. This is one that is the style and kind of the primary driver of social media is listening versus broadcasting. There's a term called turn the bullhorn around. So instead of a bullhorn, you've got a listening device, and that's a phrase Tara Hunt kind of really does a lot of work with. But turn the bullhorn around. So the primary driver over here is listen first. This is relationship based. You listen to other people. You find out what's interesting to them. Over here, you broadcast as loud and as often as you can. And there's a continuum there. Once again, it's not exclusive, but it's the primary drivers.